Welcome to Digital Marketing Mastery. Today's lecture is entitled Big Data, Digital Behavior, and Search Engine Optimization. Today we're going to talk about three important components to developing a digital strategy. First, we'll talk about big data and how it's fundamentally changed the digital marketing landscape. Second, we'll talk very briefly about behavior-based marketing and advertising. And actually, another instructor teaches this in more depth if you're interested in this topic. And thirdly, we'll discuss SEOs and Google AdWords. Google AdWords is a tool that can help buttress your digital marketing strategy if used correctly. You know, I like to start out with what the theory is, what the philosophy behind things are. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about big data before we get into the practicum and how we're actually going to use it. So what is big data? Big data is actually a blanket term for a collection of data sets that are very, very large and complex, and so large and complex that they become difficult to process using just regular on-hand data management tools or traditional data processing applications. Now, what does this include? All right, this includes a certain amount of challenges, one of which is capture, curation, storage, search, sharing, transfer, of course analysis, which we've already talked about, and visualization, which we talked about last week. The trend to larger data sets is due to the additional information, which is derivable from analysis of a single large set of related data as compared to smaller sets of the same total amount of data, which allows ultimately correlations to be found to spot business trends, marketing trends, determine the quality of research, and other sorts of things. It's used everywhere nowadays. Now, data sets actually grow in size in part because they're increasingly being gathered by huge amounts of information sensing mobile devices, sensory technologies, which are embedded in your phone and your mobile technologies, remote sensing, software logs, cameras, which we use every day, microphones, which I'm actually using right now, radio frequency identification or RFID readers, and wireless sensor networks. So the challenge for marketing professionals is how to use big data to better micro-target our audiences or our market audience using data from open source tools like NodeXL and others that we've already talked about. So how do we adapt and tailor our strategy based on what the data tells us about our market? So some background. We've already talked about in the audience analysis lecture how big data and audience micro-targeting is being used for political campaigns, but how is it being used now? In 2012, the Obama administration actually announced the Big Data Research and Development Initiative, which actually explored or is exploring how big data could be used to address important problems faced by the government. The initiative was composed of 84 different big data programs spread across six departments in our government. Big data analysis, actually, as we talked about, played a large role in Obama's successful 2012 re-election campaign. As a result, he began another initiative that we're talking about right now, the Big Data Research and Development Initiative. The U.S. federal government actually owns 6 of the 10 most powerful supercomputers in the world. The Utah Data Center is a data center currently being constructed by the U.S. NSA, or National Security Agency. And when finished, the facility will be able to handle a large amount of information collected by the NSA over the internet. Now, how is this becoming relevant to marketing? As we see, the government already sees this as a very, very valuable tool. As marketing analysts, we should think about it in the same way. So let's talk about the overarching landscape of big data. What does it mean? What does it look like right now? A little bit of history. Since the first censuses were actually taken and crop yields were recorded back in ancient times, essentially, data collection and analysis have been essential and vital to improving the functioning of society. Foundational work in things like calculus, probability theory, and statistics in the 17th and actually the 18th century as well provide an array of new tools used by scientists to more precisely predict the movements of the sun, the stars, and determine the population-wide rates of crime, marriage, and even suicide. So these tools often led to huge advances in society, many of which we benefit from today. One fun fact, actually in the 1800s, Dr. John Snow used early modern data science map to map cholera clusters in London, right? Something about disease theory that we're often very, very subject to today. People even began using Ebola mapping to do in the same type of theory as a result of the early theories of big data. Snow actually helped to lay the foundation for germ theory of disease that we still use today. Data was also used to boost economic activity and took hold in American industry. I think just studying American history, we all know who Frederick Winslow Taylor is. He actually began using a stopwatch and a clipboard to analyze productivity in a steelworks factory in Pennsylvania to increase output on the shop floor. He actually thought that data, as looked at like this, could revolutionize every aspect of life. And we see that in big data today in the Obama administration's endorsement of its research and furtherment, right? That we see the importance of that for national efficiency in day-to-day life being validated in multiple ways. But today, actually, data is more deeply woven into the fabric of our lives than we've ever seen before. We aspire to use data to solve problems, improve well-being, generate any type of economic prosperity, all beyond what we're going to talk about this class, which is designed to help marketing, advertising, and communication. How does it relate to marketing, advertising, and communication? So think about it. More than 500 million photos are uploaded and shared every single day, along with more than 200 hours of video every single minute. But the volume of information that people actually create themselves, or every individual in this class, means the full range of communications from voicemails, voice calls, emails, texts, all the way to uploaded pictures, video, and music. This pales actually in comparison to the amount of digital information created about them every day. So as much as you output, what people output about you almost doubles that. And these trends will only continue. We are in the very nascent or beginning stages of the so-called, quote unquote, as we talked about earlier, Internet of Things, right? When we see the future of our appliances, our vehicles, and the growing set of even wearable technologies able to communicate with one another in a way that makes our lives more meaningful, but also makes marketing and advertising a very, very changing field. So what does this mean with regards to advertising? What is a digital footprint, and how is it currently being used in advertising and marketing? So let's talk about something I like to refer to as behavior-based internet marketing. So, quick question. Have you ever been surfing the web and come upon an internet advertisement that actually provides almost a near direct solution for something you've just been researching or been researching lately? You can see in my slide that actually happened in 3 different places, on Facebook, in Gmail, and on the internet when I was looking things up. Did you think that it might be related to actually something we all know about, we'll talk about in the later slide, your computer cookies, or did you chalk it up to something like serendipity? You didn't know how it happened, you don't care how. The fact is, if we look behind the curtain, it's certainly not a coincidence. Behavior-based internet advertising is relatively new and very, very powerful way for advertisers to get their message in front of potential buyers that they know to be qualified. How do they know they're qualified? They know because of data. The question is, how do they know that surfer is qualified based on what data you're putting out through your internet searching? The advertisers know that because the internet advertising network is tracking your online activity. Now with tracking, advertisers know what sites you like. You're indicating it through your clicks. They know what searches you make. They've profiled you, and unlike in real life, profiling on the web is okay so far. There's no legal problem with it so far. Ethically, we can question it all day, but legally, so far, it's okay. So legal issues aside, let's talk about a further definition of the technology. Most behavioral internet advertising is based on computer cookies. Now these computer cookies are tiny files that are actually placed on your machine when you visit certain websites. In the most simplest form, you go to a web page, an advertiser has a blank spot or a placeholder for a banner ad. But instead of just serving up any banner ad, the advertiser parses through or looks through your computer for cookies to discover your likes and your dislikes. And then you are fed internet advertising actually based on your online behavior. For some people, this is not a big deal. People don't care. They like internet advertising to be targeted towards them, or they don't mind computer cookies. For others, it's a little creepy. And this leads up to a great debate. Not wanting to get into a debate on an online lecture, here are some companies that actually service this type of behavior-based advertising that you can hire if you're in charge of that at your own firm. NebuAd, N-E-B-U-A Ad, was an American online advertising company which is based in Redwood City, California. It was one of several companies developing behavior-based targeting advertising systems. Right? It actually deals with ISPs to enable them to analyze customers' web surfing habits in order to provide them with more relevant or micro-targeted advertising. Form, P-H-O-R-M, is a similar company, and they operate out of Europe. A lot of you may know of Adzilla or Project Rialto. They also appear to be using similar systems. And these are systems that, if it's relevant to your class project or to your business needs, you can research these at your own will. And in the notes section of these slides, you can find the actual names spelt out. So this slide actually goes into something that is a very, very well-known graphic called the conversation prism, which actually goes into all of the digital tools available out there today. And it's probably since outdated, but I'd like to talk a little bit about your options. And before we go into creating a digital strategy next week, I want you to know your available tactics that you can use online. Now, many of these are discussed in a later course exclusively designed to talk about digital advertising, but we would be remiss in not talking about some of the options right now. And the first is display advertising. Now, for those of you who have not heard of display advertising, it actually conveys its advertising message visually using texts, logos, animations, videos, photographs, or other graphics. Now, display advertisers actually frequently target users with particular traits to increase an ad's effect. Online advertisers, and they do this typically through their ad servers, often use cookies, as we discussed before, which are unique identifiers of specific computers, specifically yours, to decide which ads to serve a particular consumer. As advertisers collect data across multiple external websites about a user's online activity, they can actually create a detailed picture of your or your users' interests to deliver even more targeted advertising. The full-up aggregation of this data is called behavioral targeting, as we've been talking about. And advertisers can also target their audience by using what we call contextual or semantic advertising, which we've talked about before, to deliver display ads related to the content of the web page where the ads appear. Retargeting, behavioral targeting, and contextual advertising are actually all designed to increase an advertiser's ROI, or return on investment, over untargeted ads, which we'll talk about in a later exercise and lecture. Now, advertisers may also deliver ads based on a user's suspected geography, and this is called geo-targeting. A user's IP address actually communicates some geographic information, and this is at the very minimum the user's country or even region that they're in. And this geographic information from an IP can be supplemented and refined with other proxies or other information to actually narrow the range of possible locations. So for example, with mobile devices, advertisers can sometimes use a phone's GPS receiver or the location of nearby mobile towers. And with cookies or other persistent data on a user's machine, those actually may help provide a narrowing of a user's location further. Now, this is very, very difficult to do with regard to mobile, and it's controversial. Right? That said, you need to be aware of that when you purchase mobile advertising. A couple other things mentioned on the conversation pyramid: web banner advertising. Now, web banners or banner ads are typically graphical ads, and you've seen them, and they're displayed on this slide, on the next slide. Within a web page, many banner ads are delivered through actually what we call a central ad server. You also have the option of a frame ad or a traditional banner. Frame ads were actually the first form of web banners. The colloquial or conversational usage of banner ads often refers to traditional frame ads. That's what we kind of know. So if you're not familiar with that colloquial or that way of speaking, right, this is the lecture for you. Website publishers actually incorporate frame ads by setting aside a particular space on a web page. You also have pop-ups, or what they call pop-unders. A pop-up ad is displayed in a new web browser window that opens up above a website visitor's initial browser window. Now, a pop under ad opens a new browser window under a website visitor's initial browser window, as you may have discovered. You have the option of a floating ad, or what they call an overlay ad, which is a type of rich media advertisement that appears superimposed over a requested website's content. Floating ads actually may disappear or become less obtrusive after a specific or a preset time period, and that's dependent on dollars. You have the option of an expanding ad, and an expanding ad is actually a rich media frame ad that changes upon dimensions based upon a predefined condition, such as a preset amount of time, again, a visitor spends on a web page, or users click on an ad, or actually the user's mouse movement over an ad, which they can see. Expanding ads allow advertisers to fit more information over restricted ad space. You have trick banners, and trick banner is a banner ad where the ad copy actually imitates some screen element users commonly encounter, and this can be as simple as an operating system message or a popular application message to induce ad clicks or to get clicks, which is what all of our goal is, right? You have interstitial ads. An interstitial ad displays before a user can access a requested content, and sometimes this is while a user is actually waiting for the content to load, right? Interstitial ads are also known as something called interruption marketing. You have text ads. These are basically displays based on text-based hyperlinks. Now, text-based ads actually may display separately from a web page's primary content, or they can be embedded by hyperlinking individual words or phrases to an advertiser's website. Text ads can also be delivered through email marketing or text messaging marketing, right? And as we see digital marketing moving and improving on a daily basis, you see the evolution of what is frequently being considered an outdated form of marketing, which is direct mail or email marketing. But you see that now being innovated in many, many different ways. Some other ones that I'm not going to go into detail because I feel like we have a basic understanding of them. Social media marketing we've talked about, and we're going to talk about in the later lecture how to actually physically do that. Mobile advertising, email advertising, you have chat advertising, online classified advertising, adware, and of course what we're going to talk about later in this lecture, search engine marketing or search engine optimization. Now, a brief definition: search engine marketing is actually designed to increase a website's visibility in what are called SERPs, S-E-R-P-S, search engine results page. Now, search engines provide sponsored results or organic results based on a web searcher's query. Search engines often actually employ visual cues to differentiate sponsored results from organic results, meaning paid versus actually earned. Search engine marketing includes all of an advertiser's actions to make a website's listing more prominent based on topical keywords or keywords that are important to your target audience. Now, what is search engine optimization? SEO actually attempts to improve a website's organic search rankings in SERPs or search engine results pages by increasing the website's content's relevance or making your content more relevant to search terms. This includes knowing your audience, which is why we started out with so much research. Search engines regularly update their algorithms to penalize poor quality sites that try to game their rankings. Making optimization, this actually makes optimization a moving target for advertisers. And you have a lot of vendor services who offer SEO services to the generic public, for those of you who don't want to do your own SEO marketing strategy. And I actually highly recommend doing that if you don't have time for it, because doing it poorly versus doing it well will make a very big difference if your web page is to be the center point of your marketing strategy. So now that we have our terms defined, let's talk about an actual tool that will help define your digital marketing strategy. Now, Google AdWords is essentially, at its core, about buying your spaces on the Monopoly board. Right? When we're talking about taking dice and rolling the dice completely out of the game and actually buying your squares in strategic places on the Monopoly board, which is essentially a metaphor for the internet. AdWords is a tactic of developing an SEO marketing strategy. Now, if SEOs or improving your SEO is your actual end goal, Google AdWords is your means on how to get there. So how do you set one up? You can actually set up an AdWords account in about 5 minutes for about $5. And I'll walk through that in the next couple slides. Your ads actually can be seen by thousands of people searching specifically for what you have, and you don't have to pay 1 red cent until a searcher clicks your ad to visit your website. You can change your ad copy at any time you want. It's all completely up to you. And you can cancel what you deem as unprofitable ads with just essentially the click of your mouse. You can run multiple ads simultaneously and figure out to the penny which ad actually makes you the most money. Now beyond that, you can even send customers to specific aisles or shelves of your store or specific places on your Monopoly board, depending on what they're searching for. And you can get smarter and smarter over time, writing better ads, showing more appropriate headings, choosing better geographic markets, and avoiding others that don't serve you well. Now when your ads do well, you can even get Google to serve them as online newspaper or magazine ads, or put them next to Google Maps locations and broadcast them to actual cell phones automatically. This is all done through big data, as we talked about before. The Google search engine, which is actually found at google.com, actually processes hundreds of millions of searches per day. Now, every one of those searches actually represents a human being trying to solve an actual problem or satisfy an itch through finding the right information on the World Wide Web. AdWords actually allows advertisers to purchase text and links on Google's results search pages, which is the page the searcher sees after entering a word or phrase and then clicking the Google search button. Now you pay actually only for the ad, only when someone clicks on it or visits your website. Now the amount you actually pay for each visitor can be as low as 1 penny or as high as $80, depending on the quality of your ad, depending on the quality of your website, and depending on the competitiveness of the market defined by the word or phrase that you choose. This is known as a keyword, right? And then that is what is typed in to the Google search by the visitor. Now the typical search ad on a results page consists of 4 lines and actually up to 130 characters. So when and where do the ads show? You can actually choose to show your ads to the entire world, or you can limit their exposure by country, by region, by state, or even by city. Like for example, you can let them run 24/7, or you can turn the lights off on them on nights, weekends, whatever you choose. And you can choose from AdWords 3 tiers of exposure, described in later sections. So Google has actually several partners that affect your SEO. And additionally, hundreds of thousands of websites actually show AdWords ads on their pages as part of what they call the AdSense program. And the AdSense program actually pays website owners who show AdWords sites or ads on their sites. If you think of a version of a newspaper or magazine with ads next to the editorial content, the content of the page often determines which ads are shown. Now on sites devoted to weightlifting, for example, Google shows ads for workout programs or muscle building supplements rather than knitting or, say, quilting supplies. Google lets you choose whether to show your ads on these sites, and this is known collectively as Google Display Network, or just stick to the search networks. Although anyone with a website can use AdSense, Google has a special relationship with some of the most popular content sites on the web. Some of these you should know about they're actually including AOL, Ask.com, CompuServe, Earthlink, of course Gmail, which is actually owned by Google, About.com, Business.com, even the Food Network, one of my favorites, HGTV, HowStuffWorks.com, InfoSpace, Lycos, the New York Times, and Read Business Information. So let's talk about Gmail. Now Gmail is Google's webmail service. It displays AdWords results to the right of email you receive. If you choose to syndicate your ads, your prospects who use Gmail may actually see these ads if Google determines that the text of the email is relevant to your offer. Now let's talk about AdWords in a total Google context. Now Google, as we well know, rose from nothing to become the world's most popular search engine in only a few months. And it did so because it did one thing faster and better than all the rest, which is help internet searchers find exactly what they're looking for. Now, we don't want to overload you with details of, say, Google's search algorithm. That's not relevant here. And I don't think they want to reveal it. But you will become a better Google advertiser when you get the basic principles. Now, the most important word in Google's universe is something called relevance. So when you type in a word or phrase into Google, the search engine actually asks the World Wide Web for the best page to show you. The big innovations Google uses are a couple of calculations. One is called PageRank. And now PageRank is basically a measure of popularity of a particular page. And this is based on how many other web pages actually link back or link to that page and how popular those pages are. So it's sort of like high school. Like the definition of the popular kid is the one who is friends with the other popular kids. Now the other calculation is actually known as page reputation, which answers the question, okay, this page may be popular, but for what topic? The page reputation of a web page determines whether it will appear in a given search, and the page rank determines whether it will be the first listing, the third, or the 4 millionth, or the 11th. Now the entire Google empire is actually based on this ability to match the right web pages in the right priority order with a given search phrase. The day Google starts showing irrelevant or not relevant results is the day after you should have sold all your Google stock. Now, when Google started, it showed only the results of its own calculations. And these are known, as you probably well know, as organic listings. Organic listings actually appear on the left side of the Google results page, which includes organic listings only, and no AdWords entries, actually. One important term you should know is pay-per-click. Now, AdWords is a pay-per-click advertising medium. Unlike forms of advertising with PPC, or pay-per-click, you only pay for results or when live visitors go to your website. AdWords allows you as the advertiser to decide how much you're willing to pay for a visitor searching on a given keyword. Now, for example, if you sell vintage sports trading cards, you can bid more for a Babe Ruth rookie card than a John Gochnour card if you make more money selling the Babe Ruth card. Those metrics, as well as a host of others, are available to marketers through Google AdWords. So let's talk about opening a new AdWords account. So fortunately, Google has hugely simplified the process for opening an AdWords account, which is half the battle, right? First, you go to your web browser and you type in http://adwords.google.com. The link is in the notes. You can choose a language other than English if that's what your digital marketing strategy is in from a drop-down list to the right, and Google will actually translate the page using their software into that language. Sometimes the button is labeled click to begin, or sometimes it's labeled let's start, depending on the version. Select the type of email you want to use with your AdWords account. If you have actually an existing Google account, you can select the top radio button and say I have an email address and a password with Google. If not, you select I do not use the services radio button. You want to remember that an AdWords account can be created with any email address combined with an AdWords specific password. If you already have a Google account for Gmail or other Google services, you can use it for your AdWords account. If you're a Gmail junkie, for example, you'll want to collect the accounts so you don't sign yourself out of AdWords every single time you check your mail. If you don't have a Google account, you're actually prompted to create one using an existing email account. That's something you should know if you are anti-Gmail. So how do you create your first campaign? Now your AdWords account is actually structured in two levels of organization. One is campaigns and the other is groups. Now campaigns are containers in which you place ad groups, which are the functional units in which you show ads and actually select and bid on keywords. A campaign is actually defined by a set of settings that apply to all ad groups in that campaign. Now before you start advertising, you first have to create a campaign and populate it with at least one ad group, which NodeXL and all of our audience research should help you with. Now to start, we can set up a dummy campaign you will pause immediately after creating it. And I actually suggest that you all do this on your own. Now Google makes creating your campaign as easy as possible. So here's all you have to do. First you click the create your first campaign button. That seems like a very, very obvious first step. On the next page, you click the campaign type button and select search network only from the campaign type drop-down menu. You want to start with search network only because the first market research you'll do involves searches and keywords, which is important to SEOs. Depending on the type of campaign you're running, you'll begin advertising on either the search or the display networks. And you don't need to really sweat this part because you can change any of these at the campaign level whenever you want. You want to offer your campaign a name. Now, although using a simple name like campaign number 1 may be useful right now, I actually suggest tailoring it a little bit, right? Because developing some naming conventions can save you time and confusion later. Now start with the theme of the campaign and then append the word search in all caps. For example, use all caps running sandals search for a campaign in which you want to show ads to people searching for Google for running sandals and all related terms. Does that make sense? Hopefully it does. Then you want to select your locations and your languages, what networks and what devices, what bidding and what is your budget, and everybody's will differ here. And you want to set an ad rotation under advanced settings. You can click the Save and Continue button at the bottom of the page, and the rest is relatively self-explanatory. I encourage you all to actually go in at this time and play around in Google AdWords and set up an account. Now, how do you activate your account? This is an important part. Now, your ads won't actually show up on screen until you activate your account by giving Google $5 and some source of funding. You can do this by clicking the link in the alert box with the reddish pink background that looms at the top of your AdWords dashboard, and following the account activation wizard, this takes you on a tour first and then you pay at the end. That's important to do if you want your campaign to be seen. On this slide, I've actually attached some extra reading, which is actually your homework on how to use Google AdWords to help your digital marketing campaign. Now, some of you may be more advanced in this than others, so read it at your basic need level. Skim it if you already know the information, but read it based on what you need for your personal campaign. Basically, it will talk about how Google discovers, how it crawls, and how it actually serves web pages. So when you sit down to your computer and do a Google search, you're almost instantly presented with a list of results from all over the web. Right? This document actually talks about how Google finds web pages matching your query and how they determine the order of the search results. In the simplest terms, you could think of searching the web as looking at a very large book with like a huge index telling you exactly where everything is located. And when you perform a Google search, their programs actually index the results to determine the most relevant, once again that key term, results to be returned or served to you. There are 3 basic or key processes and terms that you should know in becoming a Google expert. Number 1 is crawling. Crawling is actually the process in which a Google bot discovers new and updated pages to be added to the Google index, or how your page gets added to the book. A Google bot uses an algorithm or computer programs to determine the sites to crawl, how often, and how many pages to fetch from each site. Indexing. The Google bot processes each of these pages it crawls in order to compile a massive index of all the words it sees and their actual location on a page. And let's talk about serving results. When a user enters a query or a keyword, Google their machines search the index for matching pages and actually return the results that they believe are the most relevant to the user. This affects PageRank. PageRank is actually the measure of importance of a page, once again, based on the incoming links from other pages. And in simpler terms, you can link to each page on your site from another site, and this adds to your site's PageRank, as we talked about before. So I've attached this reading as your homework. Use it at your own discretion. So let's talk about metrics, which will be important for a later lecture, which we discuss how to determine your ROI. Now, some metrics that are commonly associated with SEOs are impressions, which we've talked about, clicks, average positions, and CTR, or click-through rate. Now, what are each of these? Impressions are actually the number of times any URL from your site appeared in a search result viewed by a user. And this is not including paid AdWords search impressions. Clicks, I think we know or are all familiar with, but if you don't know, clicks are the number of clicks, or the times people push their mouse button to your website URLs from a Google search results page. And once again, this does not include clicks on a paid AdWords search results. Average position. Average position is the average ranking of your website URLs for the query or group of queries that you've chosen. One example of this is if your site's URL appeared at position 3 for one query and position 7 for another, the average position would be the average of those two, which would be 5. And finally, the click-through rate, something you're probably all familiar with. Now, click-through rate is actually calculated as clicks over impressions times 100. That's a commonly used term with metrics, and it's becoming more common in justifying web ROI. Another way to improve SEM or search engine marketing campaigns is actually to outsource content discovery platforms in relation to behavioral advertising. So here on this slide, you see a few companies that I've used before that are actually useful for content marketing and actually getting your pages seen. Outbrain is an advertising platform whose content marketing module actually offers to help internet publishers to increase web traffic to their websites. Now, how does it do it? It does so by actually presenting them with links to related and interesting articles and other trusted content. Outbrain provides recommendation for certain media types, whether online, video, or mobile. How does it do it? Outbrain uses a term we talked about earlier in this lecture called behavioral targeting to recommend interesting articles, slideshows, blog posts, photos, all of your content, essentially videos or anything, to a reader, rather than relying on more basic or related items widget like Amazon would do. Now, this is done to encourage the reader to stay on the site, to increase engagement, and ultimately to generate an increase in advertising revenue. Now, other sites which you can look into on your own time that operate in very similar ways are Taboola, Google AdSense, as we talked about earlier, Zemanta, or Vigilink. All actually serve the same purpose, which is direct people to content by attaching a subbar of related content to a well-known content platform such as a news source. So what's on the horizon for us? What are we going to learn next week, and what can you look forward to? In the upcoming weeks, we're going to learn how to promote content on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Groupon, and even mobile. So you can look forward to that. And next week specifically, we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to put together a full-up digital marketing campaign and strategy. We've talked a lot about research. We've talked a lot about options. We've covered each of the components in some form or another of a digital marketing strategy, all the tactics involved. But next week, we're going to actually talk about how to put together the strategy itself. Time for everybody's favorite. What's the homework? I'd like you all to check Canvas for your reading assignment on SEOs. I'd like you to complete your Hootsuite training. This includes watching video number 120, 125, 130, and 140. Since the content reading is light, we've included more videos, and this will complete your Hootsuite training and your social media certification if you chose to go through that program. I'd like you to post questions about Hootsuite that you have to the discussion board. This will be your homework for this week, and we can address and troubleshoot any issues you've had throughout the quarter with that regard. And I'd like you to play around with AdWords and sign up for an account if it's relevant to your project.